Welcome back to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Hunter from Kilgore PD. He has 33 years experience in law enforcement, but has spent the last 21 years as a chief. So more of his career has been spent in an executive position. He is also the past president of the Texas Police Chief, and he is the PsyCop rep for
SACOM.
sorry,
SACOM.
SACOP rep for Texas in the Southern region. So I am really looking forward to having him as a guest on today's show. I'm going to let him kind of hop in here and give more background into his experience because he obviously has a wealth of knowledge in the executive position. So welcome to the show, Chief Hunter. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paige.
Of
Uh,
course.
I started my career in 1992 as I was graduating from college. I went to the police academy at Sam Houston State University and then went back to my hometown of Athens where I began my policing career. And after 3 years there, I wanted to move to the Metroplex. So I moved to the Dallas Metroplex where I began my career with Addison Police Department. And it was a smaller agency in the Dallas Metroplex, but it allowed me a lot of growth. So I worked in narcotics as an undercover. I worked as a detective, as a supervisor on patrol, um, just really able to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have been able to do in some of the larger agencies. And then I came back out east into rural East Texas, where I became a police chief in Jasper, Texas, for about 6 years. And then I've been here at Kilgore going on 15 years. So as you stated, I've got 21 years experience as an administrator. So longer in this seat than I have in others. So,
That's amazing. And can you tell me a little bit about the work for ICP and SACOP, what you guys are doing in that perspective?
well, of course, ICP has a large wellness program, and I'm not involved specifically with that, but we do touch that in SACOP. SACOP is the State Association of Chiefs of Police. Each state can have a representative, and then I've been elected as the regional rep, so the Southern region. So that goes anywhere from Virginia down to Florida over to Texas. And we talk about things that are occurring within the states, things that are specific to the Southern region, and some of that is wellness. So certainly a topic that we dealt with.
I know that you come from a different generation where maybe wellness wasn't talked about or it wasn't widely accepted. What was that turning point for you where you started to really understand the importance of wellness and start to prioritize that for your organization?
So as you stated, it just wasn't talked about at all. Um, when I started, my shift included several Vietnam vets. They didn't talk about the feelings. You had a one psychological when you came to work, and you did not talk about your feelings whatsoever. You were supposed to be strong and not show your emotions. When I went to Addison, we did get into a physical wellness program. Now, of course, wellness should be comprehensive. It should be the mind and the body. And sometimes we've not gotten into the mind until recently. But Addison was pretty much on the forefront in Texas with a physical fitness program. So I got into that and I understood the need for that. I saw a lot of officers that actually had some type of issue that was found through the testing. And I mean, we had several that had open heart surgery because they found an issue, several with cancer. So it was a good program. It was hard to implement because it was different at the time and it was cutting edge, but we still weren't talking about mental health. And I guess I got exposed by going to conferences, reading, watching podcasts like yourself. But I have myself been involved in several crises, and when you get in those, you will have empathy because you yourself have gone through it and you understand how you were treated, and there's a better way forward. So that's just kind of my path, and I've decided that I'm going to be different, and I'm gonna shout from the top as an administrator that it's okay not to be okay, and there's a better way to treat people when they've gone through these crises. You know, the fire department has done a better job than us in so many ways for so many years. They didn't even know they were doing it, but they can go on a crisis situation, and they may encounter death or something else. They all get back in their engine or their truck and they go back to the station and they talk about it. they were naturally decompressing and didn't even know it. And that's one thing that we don't do. Unfortunately, that officer can be involved with those officers doing CPR. And as soon as he clears that, we're going to send him to another call. He hasn't had time to come down off of that emotional high that he was on. And we send him to a barking dog call, and we send him to a shoplifter at Walmart. And then we wonder why um, he had a behavioral issue at some point. I mean, we just got to get better at this. So we're trying, and I know a lot of people have schisms and other things, and they will try to decompress, but we're just really touching the surface in a lot of ways. But unfortunately, unlike the fire department, we're going right back to another call. They
Right.
may not. So that immediate decompression just doesn't happen with us.
Yeah. And from your experience, do you think that most leadership is on board with wellness and sharing your same thoughts of the importance of this?
Unfortunately, I've seen that it varies, but your older chiefs don't seem to embrace it as much
Mm.
as the younger generations do. They're growing up with it where we're talking about it. But the older generations that I know that I'm a part of just don't talk about it as much. So they've had a more difficult time embracing it as some. And so you do see that there is a variation among chiefs. And there are those chiefs that just haven't embraced total wellness program.
Yeah. How do you think that we can create a culture where not just executives, but also officers, dispatch, everyone within the organization recognizes the importance of wellness and can start being a little bit more proactive about it? Because to your point, you know, of course, there's going to be reactionary things that happen after a critical incident, or at least that's the hope that there's schism or something, after an incident that can happen. But to your point, the down regulation part of it in between calls, like those are things that can be implemented in certain ways, or there are things that we can do outside of the call volume or outside of work to be a little bit more proactive. How do you think that we can encourage executives and everyone within the organization to be more proactive and open-minded to wellness strategies?
Well, I think a podcast like this, I saw one of my former peers on one of these, and I enjoyed that podcast that you had with the urban police chief. But I think our conferences are beginning to have wellness programs that breakout sessions that we're sharing this. Um, we continue to push this out in some of the academies. We're getting there, but cultural change takes a while, 5 to 7 years at minimum. And we're changing the culture. And I think it's just going to take a while, but just continue to expose people to other ideology and let them know that there are things out there for them, for their staff, and continuing to um, share with other agencies within your region, things of that nature. It is occurring. It's just occurring slowly. And unfortunately, it is reactive. You kind of touched on that. And sometimes we don't think about it till we have our own crisis with our own department. And then all of a sudden we're we're then needing to talk about wellness, mental health issues, and we don't have a program in place. So I
Yeah.
think we're reacting. Policing is very busy, and chief executives are busy. There's a lot of things that are on their plates, and unfortunately, we deal with what hits our desk that day, and sometimes we can be reactive. I do.
Yeah. Do you think that empathy plays a role in creating more of a culture of wellness? I think you said this earlier on that you know what it's like to go through these things. And so you have that empathy. And you had shared a personal story with me that I was hoping you can share to our listeners about maybe how you were treated and how that has impacted the way that you show up and empathize. So if you were willing to share that, I think that that would be great. But I'm curious if you think empathy plays a role.
I think he's a huge role. If you can't put yourself in that person's shoes, you're not going to know exactly what they go through. You and I talked about, everybody is going to be different. What impacts someone may not impact you, and we have to understand that. In the situation that I was in, unfortunately, I've been in a couple of shootings. and one in the Dallas Metroplex. I felt like I was treated as if I was the suspect.
Mm.
And I was taken from the scene, taken to an interview room. Although the weapon that I shot was a shotgun, they took my pistol. They didn't give me the pistol back. I sat in that room for over an hour without people talking to me. And then I was required to write a statement. You shouldn't do at that point. And I felt as if I was the suspect in the case. And there was no empathy at that point, and it really impacted me. And I said from that day forward, I would never do that to anyone if I ever had the chance to be in charge. And I won't do that to this day. And I'll make sure that when something like that happens under my administration, we're going to handle it differently.
Yeah, and when we spoke offline, I really appreciated when you said, and this is, I'm going to quote you here because I thought that these words were really impactful, but you said, what doesn't affect you might wreck someone else. And um, I, when I was in my really dark times where I had shoved everything down and I had hardened and I had postured up because I wasn't dealing with things that I needed to deal with, I very much had the mentality of, well, this doesn't affect me, and so why is it affecting you? Or this doesn't affect me, so get over it. I was definitely that person, and it took me time to, I would say time, maturity, growth, doing the work on myself to get there, but it took me time to have that empathy for other people and to understand that what doesn't affect me might really impact you. And just because it doesn't affect me doesn't mean that you don't need the resources to be able to get through this really hard time. And I think to your point, if we can have more of that understanding and realize that it's not about us, it's not about you as an individual, it's about the people around you and how can you support everybody. And there are going to be different things that help people that you know might not work for the next person. It's not a one size fits all approach, but I think that to your point, it starts with that empathy. I also think that our past experiences help to shape the way that we show up for other people. And so that story of you saying, I never want someone to feel that way. Like, I think that you had to go through that to understand what you don't want. And unfortunately, it was something that was really hard, but now you're able to show up as a better leader because you've experienced those things.
It certainly gave me a different perspective. And then in 2014, I went through um, Sam Houston State post-critical incident, and it gave me another perspective because in that peer group, there were dispatchers. And I think officers sometimes tend to think that dispatchers are not impacted by the job, but they are. They're emotionally impacted by the job. And I found that that day is they shared their stories around the table. There were at least three dispatchers in there. And some of them, it wasn't one incident, it was a culmination of 20 years of incidents.
Right.
And they had been emotionally impacted as great or greater than officers that were on the street facing possible physical attacks. So I just think by exposing ourselves and listening to others, you can see what others might go through. And we have to have that empathy for others. And, like I shared with you earlier, what impacts one, what really can be tough for someone might not be tough for someone else. And we've just got to be open-minded with that and make sure that we're caring for all of our staff at
Yeah.
any given time.
Can you talk a little bit about um, the Texas Peer Support Network? There was legislation around this to provide everyone with peer support resources. Can you explain how did that start and what does that currently look like?
Well, in Texas, our legislators meet every 2 years. And several sessions ago, they met because of the amount of suicides that Texas was seeing. We often lead in those numbers, and that's not a number we want to lead in.
No.
So they developed the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network at that point, and that's legislated, and it's provided for by Texas funds. And at this point, the uh, University of North Texas, Dallas, is actually in charge of that grant and administers that. And it provides an app to any officer within the state of Texas. In this last legislative session, they've opened that up to dispatchers and jailers as well.
Yeah.
So um, those staff members can have the app, and at any time that they feel this dark moment, they've gone through this crisis, they can actually open up that app. They can talk to a peer that is just like them somewhere within the state of Texas. And if they need a clinician beyond that, this program will pay for that. And nothing is going to come back to the agency. It's anonymous, and that's the way that it needs to be. And in our agency, I've posted that QR code on the back of every door, in every bathroom, because everyone's going to go to the restroom. It's there. We know that it's there, and I want it to be visible. And as I said earlier, I share with them often. It's okay not to be okay. And if it doesn't come from the top and they don't feel like they can actually reach out, they may not reach out. And then we need to have those difficult conversations and make sure that this behavior is not coming back to some critical incident and other things. But the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network is going to continue to grow. Along with it, you have the Texas Blue Chip program that has the QR code. And I don't have one with me right now, but it looks like a little poker chip, and it has a QR code on that. And we're giving it out throughout the state so that someone can have one. And if they don't have that app, they can just hit the QR code that's on that blue chip, and they can receive assistance from a peer at that point. And then, like I said, if they need additional, we'll set them up with a clinician.
What has been the effectiveness of that program? Have you had any direct results or feedback from people of the efficacy of that peer network?
From what I understand, the statistics on suicide have been reduced. And obviously, I mean, these conversations are occurring almost daily from
Yeah.
around the state. They're divided into regions, and then there are peers throughout that region. And it's always going to be seen as successful if someone can pick up that phone and immediately talk to a peer who may have been through something like that, but obviously have been trained to talk to them. And we've got someone for them to reach out to. So it's going to help. Some of it is not going to be, we won't be able to measure it, but we will certainly know how many phone calls that we receive. Do we continue to receive phone calls? Are people asking for clinicians more than they have before? And I think as it becomes more widespread, as people begin to know about it, I think we'll get more benefits from it as it continues to grow.
What a powerful statement to say that this program has reduced suicide,
Mhm.
that this has saved lives. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to save lives and to make sure that the people within your organization, within the law enforcement community, have the resources that they need to have a long and successful life.
Mhm.
And of course, the career is a part of it, but I try to really pinpoint it to it's your life.
Yeah.
How can we make sure that you're successful? And so, what advice would you have to someone who's maybe not in Texas who wants to start something like this within their state?
Well, they could reach out to the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network. There's a website. And that, of course, is at this time, it's at the University of North Texas, the Dallas campus. And I'm sure that they could help them at that point
Yeah.
and show them how it'd been developed in Texas, how it was legislatively adopted, and how it's being paid for. And Texas will continue to go through this, and they'll look at this program and continue to evaluate it. I know this year that they actually included firemen. Now they won't come into the same network, but firemen will have their own. And as I had stated earlier, they go through this as well. I just think that in some cases they've done a better job at decompressing following the incident, and we have not done that.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be a good start for them to reach out through that website and talk to the director himself and go from there.
That's awesome.
You asked one thing, how do you know? Well, I had a conversation or was a part of the conversation the other day where an agency, a mid-sized agency in Texas, had a suicide. Someone had reached out to them about this program, and then unfortunately they had another suicide. we're reactive, unfortunately. And then we begin to see we really need this training early on. This needs to be something that we start these wellness programs well before we have a crisis. And
Yeah.
then we're ready to deal with the crisis when it occurs. But actually having that QR code within the agency and actually training people there within the agency and making sure that that app is available, that in itself is a game changer.
Yeah.
What if that person that was in crisis had the app and could reach out and receive help and not go so deep and dark into that spot that they couldn't return?
Yeah.
So it is going to be impactful.
I agree. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm hoping that anyone who's listening understands the importance of this as in a proactive way. And to your point, if you can reach out and get some information on how you might be able to regionalize this. When we talked offline, you said something that I was really curious what you meant by this. And I was hoping that you can dive into it a little bit more. You said that your brain is like a computer. What did you mean by that?
Well, we know that anything that we put into our computer stays there, even if you try to delete it. So anything that we've seen throughout our career is in our mind. I can go back to the first person that I saw die in a DWI accident. It doesn't bother me, but I can actually go back to that. I can recall it. It is within my mind, and you can't purge that. So we continue to just add one crisis on top of another crisis or incident. I'll call that an incident. It wasn't really a crisis, but it was impactful for me because it was the first time that I saw someone actually take their last breath. And we will go through many crises within our career. And those crises will stay there. They're not purged. And we have to find a way to deal with them and deal with them in the right way. As I stated, when I started in law enforcement, the most of the individuals that I was around that had tenure were Vietnam vets. I don't think in some ways they had dealt with what had happened overseas. And then it was manifesting in alcoholism and the high divorce rates and things of this nature. And we just didn't talk about mental health. And now we are, and we will make a change. There will be a cultural change in this, and it will be often talked about from the day that someone enters this profession all the way through. But we still have a long ways to go.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that perspective. I've actually never heard of it explained that way, but it makes complete sense. And I think, I've heard this expression of the balloon. Have you heard this too?
I,
Like you're everything that you go through, right? You're like putting more air into this balloon, and eventually it's going to be at full capacity. Eventually, you're going to have to offload some of these things. And unfortunately, like you said, it becomes more of that reactionary because the balloon pops or we have a complete meltdown in some way. And now we're forced into this position where now we feel broken or now we feel like there's no options. And so if we can get in front of it a little bit more, if we can start these conversations as early as possible and understand what those resources are, I think that in a lot of ways, people don't know what to do. And I think that talking about it is a really, really strong first step of like, how can you start to just offload that a little bit? How can you talk to a peer? How can you talk to a therapist? If you have a strong family unit and you're able to communicate in that way, how can you just slowly start taking that air out, slowly start like just decompressing when you can and offloading some of those things. And then there's other things that you can do to, help promote more mental and emotional wellness. And I was hoping that you could maybe explain some of the things that you have seen to be successful, and things that maybe you're doing organizationally to help with that.
well, I think the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network is great.
Yeah.
Uh, I think wellness, as I said, is comprehensive. It's not just the mind, it's the body, it's the body, it's the mind, it's both. And we've got to focus on both of those. I would tell chiefs and administrators, go out and ask your younger officers, get a committee together and let them work on the wellness program. They themselves know what they need better than we do.
Yeah.
As you had mentioned, I'm from a different generation. I need to understand and be open-minded that um, how I deal with things is going to be different than they're going to deal with things. So I need to go back down as an administrator and make sure that the others that are from the newer generations are involved in crafting your mental health process and your wellness program and get them involved. They do want to be involved. So, there's a place for someone, and we just need to open it up. I believe in things like post-critical incident. There's a program in Texas that's run through Sam Houston State University, which is our law enforcement university within the state. And they have EMDR. I love EMDR.
Mhm.
I was told before I went through it one time that it's not voodoo, but it was strange. I will say that. But in the end, it can reprogram part of those issues that could be triggers to someone, and it works. And we know that our men and women that are coming out of the military are exposed to EMDR. We've got to expose our officers to EMDR. You can find a clinical psychologist that can do it. Just make sure that you find a good one. Maybe the state has someone, maybe they have a program like ours, but that can help out. And what that does is that just takes a, a crisis that it has become an issue within your life, and there's a trigger to it, and it can reprogram that trigger. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Just continuing to get things out there like this podcast and other things, and making sure that health and wellness are at the foremost part of our profession. If we can't help our staff to be healthy, they're not going to stay. And at this point, they're a commodity. There are not a lot of people coming into the profession. We've got to take care of them. So it starts with their health and their wellness.
I agree that wellness is multidimensional and there's lots of different pillars and lots of different ways that we can support that. And I think to your point, your people are your most valuable asset. And so, how can you provide the things that matter to them and that are going to be successful? I think historically, through my experience, and I've only been in this space for 8 years, so definitely not as long as you, but my experience was there was always this attention to utilization. So it was like, we want to make sure that we're putting things in place that are being utilized. And I think that that's important. It's important to have that buy-in and to make sure that people are actually taking advantage of these resources. But I think that we can take that to another level and say, okay, it's great that they're using it, but is it actually helping them? And I think that that has to be the goal, that whatever it is that you guys are doing, that it's actually helping your people to create longevity, to live happier, healthier lives, to show up and, be more motivated and have effective decisions when they're, working for you within the organization and to have that culture. So I think, to your point, it's like, how can you maybe collaborate with your organization to figure out what it is that they are going to want to do? And then how can you then determine the effectiveness of that programming? And is it saving lives? Is it helping to promote healthier employees?
I agree.
You mentioned this a few times, and I know that you have been in an executive position for over 20 years, and you said it has to come from the top down. And we already talked about this a little bit that there might be some people who are in an executive position who come from that, you know, older, I'll put in quotes, generation, and maybe aren't receptive to these things. What do you think are the steps that can create more of an open-mindedness, and what are the qualities that create a good leader, and how can we train maybe the younger generation to step into these leadership roles and have that open mind and that prioritization of wellness?
I think the younger generations have that,
Yeah.
um, and they're exposed to it. For the older generations, we just have to be open-minded. For a good leader, you've got to be a good listener.
Mhm.
I think that you've got to expose yourself outside of your office to different things, and wellness has been around out there for a while. It's not a new concept, but it's something that's evolving, and we need to stay up to date with it. And like I said, there's no better way than to get your own staff involved because they know what they need.
Mhm.
And if you get their involvement, that's how you get the buy-in. But a good leader is going to lead from the front. So therefore, I want to make it known that it's okay not to be okay. I share my experiences. I have no problems with that. I want them to know about those things. And when I went to PCIS, I didn't think I had an issue with the shooting, the fatal shooting that I've been involved in there, but I did, and that came out through that process. And EMDR was great for me. I did have a trigger. I don't think that I saw it until I went through the program, but I think we need to lead from the front, and we need to make sure that it's okay that we share examples, that we talk about mental health, that we get people involved, and you have to make it a living program. You don't just go out and get a policy and put it in the manual and let that be it. It's got to be a living program that everybody's involved in. So when you hire new recruits, you've got to talk about it. When you have supervisor retreats, you've got to talk about it. You continue to keep it a living program so that others will understand that this agency or your agency are accepting of our mental health challenges that we will face. It's just out there. You're going to face them. You can't deny it. So let's learn how to deal with it. And like you said earlier, let's be proactive.
Mm. No, I really like that. A good leader is a good listener. I think that statement is so powerful. And having the ability as a leader to have authentic conversations around wellness and to share your past experiences so people can learn from that and they can understand the why to create that buy in. And ultimately, I think by doing that, you're creating a space of safety and you are adding wellness to the culture. I think that I think, and I've had this experience too, where I I always tried to give the perception that nothing affected me and that I was perfect. And I thought that that was how to be a leader or how to present myself. And I realized that by doing that, I was completely isolating people around me because it's not relatable. It's not relatable for me to be like, yeah, nothing impacts me. I'm good. Like, what do you mean? I'm perfect. Because then the person who's hearing that is like, oh, wow, like there must be something wrong with me then because, that impacted me, but it's not impacting them. So, like, I guess I just should shove this down even more and pretend like it's not affecting me, even though it is. And so, by having that ability to be vulnerable, and I know that that word is sometimes a hard word to get on board with because it's scary to be vulnerable sometimes, but having the ability to share your experience, to be vulnerable, and to let people know that like these things affected you too as a leader, and it's okay if it affects them, and you're going to do whatever you can to be proactive and reactive to support them.
I agree. It's got to be something that is talked about often, and it's meant to be okay. But just like you said, we will go to people and we'll say, "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm okay," and we leave it at that.
Mm.
But we probably, if we asked that question, we knew that there was probably an issue already. So
Yeah.
we need to find a way to talk to them. And then literally we need to go back. So you've got a crisis that occurs. Let's go back in 30 days. Let's revisit this. Let's see how they're doing at this point. Let's go back at 60 days. Um, we have seen that statistically, officers that are involved in OIS and officer involved shooting, that, it's not dealt with properly. Within 2 years, they're gone from the profession. We don't need that to happen. So, we've got to get better at making sure that we're dealing with each and every one that's out there because, as we've already stated throughout this podcast, everyone can deal with things differently. So
Yeah.
we need to be open-minded.
Yeah, I really agree with you that I think that we have been conditioned to have obligatory conversations about things, and I think that it is almost like this repetition that we've gotten into of like, hey, how are you? Good, good, great,
All right.
and there's nothing behind it. And so, to your point, asking better questions, like truly showing up and having the time to receive the answer to it. If you're asking a question in passing, that person doesn't feel like you're actually asking and caring. It just feels like an obligation to ask. And if you have that moment of like pause, look someone in the eye, maybe have some follow-up questions prepared to make sure that everything is okay and ask those better questions. So I agree with you. I have one final question, and then I'll let you have the floor if we missed anything. But what words of advice would you give to someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier, or something that has helped you along the way.
Well, I think I immersed myself too much in the job, and it became who I was and how I identified myself. And it doesn't need to happen. You've got to have a work balance. And we're seeing that with the younger generations. They want their time, and that's okay. We didn't have our time, and we all work extra jobs. And we've got to get away from that mentality.
Mhm.
And they need their work balance, work life, and off-duty balance. They've got to have that. And we need to make sure that we can deliver that as well. That can come from, providing a 4-day work week for your support staff, your civilian staff. Look at varying shifts on patrol, making sure that they have ample time off. Um, sometimes we schedule people back to back and they don't have that time that they need. One thing that I missed earlier was, we every agency probably needs a chaplaincy, a chaplain. That kind of program that's out there. Our chaplains are actually trained in CISM, and they can go to the event site if there is a critical incident. They can meet with our staff and the decompression moment. They can go into the briefings and talk about it. But there's just so many things. It's just opening up yourself, looking at ICP, their wellness programs, asking people around you about their wellness programs, what works, what doesn't work, getting the newer officers involved because they know what works for them, just being open-minded and remembering that the crisis will happen, the incidents will happen, and they're going to pile into our computer, as I said earlier, into our brains, and we can't purge them. So we have to learn how to deal with them so that we don't take them home all the time, so that they don't impact our behavior, things of this nature. So, to me, I would just tell younger officers, make sure that you have that balance in your life between work and off duty, and take time with your family. This is just a job. It's a career. It doesn't need to be your life.
Thank you, Chief Hunter.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your time so much. I I really, really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you for being here. And again, if we missed anything, if there's anything else you want to add, please feel free. But that's all I have for you today.
Thank you so much.
Of course. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And we'll see you again next time.